He was wearing faded jeans, old sneakers, and an unbranded shirt. He walked into a $1 million real estate auction in silence, made 3 successful bids, and walked away as the owner of 2 buildings. No one noticed. No one even noticed him. But there he was, a man who understood the secret that most people ignore. True power walks with one's head down. Now compare him to the other type, the one who drives a car he can't afford, films every glass of champagne, stamps the name of a designer on his chest as if begging, "Believe me, I am someone." He didn't buy freedom, he bought approval. He didn't build wealth, he built a showcase. And every showcase has something in common. It's made to be looked at and to be broken. What you're going to hear today is not about aesthetic minimalism or cheap talk of less is more. It's about war. A silent war between appearing and possessing, between impressing others and building yourself. What no one told you is that appearing poor can be a millionaire move, because while you run to be noticed, true strategists accumulate fortunes in anonymity. Invisible, untouchable, unstoppable. The problem was never the desire to have more. The problem is that you learned to desire for the wrong reasons. As a child, you didn't want a branded sneaker because it was comfortable. You wanted it because others would look. And that never stopped. Growing up, for most people, is just refining the same instinct, exchanging the sneaker for an SUV, the expensive backpack for a Swiss watch, the bicycle for the apartment seen in a magazine. Even if all of this comes with interest, installments, and nighttime anxiety. The uncomfortable truth is that showing off is a prison disguised as conquest. Every time you buy to impress, you don't acquire a good, you acquire a role. And the cost of maintaining that role is very high. You become a prisoner of a performance that demands constant applause. If you stop showing off, it seems like you no longer have anything. And if you stop having it, it seems like you've stopped being it. This cycle is brutal and silent. It devours salaries, relationships, self-esteem, and worst of all, it turns financial freedom into a horizon that never arrives. This is where the concept known as the Diderot Effect comes in. Denis Diderot, an 18th century philosopher, received a luxurious robe as a gift, but the gift turned into a curse. The robe clashed with the rest of the house. So he changed the furniture, bought more sophisticated objects, and remodeled everything to match the new piece. The result? Debt, stress, frustration. All of this because he couldn't stand the idea of looking outside the norm that he himself created. Sound familiar? Today, the robe has become the latest generation iPhone. You buy one, and suddenly you feel ashamed of your backpack. You change the backpack, then your sneakers don't match. You change the sneakers, and now your car seems too old. Before you know it, you're no longer buying out of necessity, you're buying for image coherence. And that's dangerous, because the market knows it, social media knows it, the algorithm knows it, and they all win when you lose control. The most perverse thing is that showing off is sold as freedom, but it's exactly the opposite. Those who live to prove they have it have nothing more than the approval of others. And approval is an unstable, addictive currency that depreciates with every like. The car of the year becomes the car of the month. The clothes you want today are your embarrassment tomorrow. You become a slave to what used to be a dream. And here's the lowest blow. The more you try to appear rich, the less real capital you accumulate. Because showing off doesn't just cost money, it costs focus, it costs time, it costs mental energy. You lose opportunities, connections, and even credibility, because those who live to appear to be rich usually don't have time to build. Do you know who understood this early? The truly rich. They learned that too much visibility attracts envy, scams, lawsuits, kidnappings, self-interested people. That's why they operate in silent mode. While you post the keys to your financed car, they sign the deed to a farm in the name of a holding company. No stories, no hashtags, only real assets. And the most curious thing? The more invisible they become, the freer they are. Because when no one expects you to look rich, you have the space to be whatever you want, including really rich. There is a kind of wealth you don't see. And you don't see it because it doesn't need to be shown. It is quiet, stable, strategic. It is wealth built not to feed the ego, but to protect freedom. While most people rush to climb the social pyramid as if it were a stage, the truly rich play another game, a game of shadows. They understood early on that exposure is the greatest enemy of autonomy, that every time you show off what you have, you lose some control over who you are. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on the planet, still lives in the same modest house he bought in the 1950s. Ronald Read, an American janitor, lived like an ordinary citizen, frequenting the same cheap coffee shops for decades, until his death, when it was revealed that he had accumulated more than $8 million in silent investments. No one knew, not even his family. This is no coincidence. This is pattern. This is method. They didn't live below their means because of scarcity, but because of strategy. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "If you want to be rich, do not increase your possessions, decrease your desires." This phrase, translated into the 21st century, is a bombshell, because it dismantles the entire industry that profits from your emptiness. The Stoics understood that freedom begins when you no longer need to desire what the world shoves down your throat. Resisting ostentation, for them, was not moralism. It was self-defense, and today it proves more relevant than ever. Behavioral economics calls this resistance to herd behavior. It is the rare ability to not follow the crowd just because it seems to know what it is doing. It is the opposite of what we see in trends. New cell phones that replace old ones that are still working, cars traded in before they are paid off, trips paid in installments to feed a timeline that lasts 24 hours. The truly rich do not follow herds, they follow numbers. And those numbers tell us, the less you need to show, the more you can multiply. Invisible wealth has a brutal advantage. It is crisis-proof. Those who live below the radar can move quickly, make decisions without having to keep up appearances, change direction without having to answer to the audience. On the other hand, the ostentatious person lives trapped by their own image. If they back down, it looks like failure. If they change their style, it looks like decadence. If they sell something, it looks like it's broken. The audience demands it. The audience judges it. And ironically, the audience never really applauds. But there is another, even more strategic point: protection. Those who flaunt their wealth become targets of envy, of scams, of requests, of threats. Exposure creates vulnerabilities that no luxury brand can protect against. And the rich know this. That's why they prefer to appear ordinary, discreet, invisible. They don't buy the flashiest car, they buy the most functional. They don't invest in clothes that scream, they invest in assets that yield. They don't need to appear rich, because they've already won. And here is the contradiction that few have the courage to accept. The more you try to appear successful, the less time and energy you have to actually become that person. What separates you from financial freedom is not a lack of money. It is the emotional cost of wanting to be seen. It is the urgency to prove to the world a victory that has not yet happened. But the good news? You can leave this game. And the first step is to disappear from the stage. Disappearing from the stage is not giving up on life. It is stopping acting. It is stopping wasting energy trying to sustain a character that only exists because the world demands a spectacle. When you abandon the need to appear successful, there is room to build a life that really is. A life where time becomes yours again. Money stops slipping through the cracks of the ego, and freedom stops being a distant dream and becomes a concrete math. Because at the end of the day, real wealth is not measured in assets, it is measured in options. The question few people ask is, how much does your freedom cost? Not in terms of salary, but in terms of lifestyle. Because someone who spends $20,000 a month needs millions to retire. On the other hand, someone who lives well on $5,000 can achieve independence in a few years. What defines your financial destiny is not how much you earn, but how much you need to spend to feel good. And this calculation changes everything. The invisible rich understand this. They live comfortably, without fanfare, because they know that every dollar spent is one more day without a boss, one less month of submission, one more step towards sovereignty. But the advantage of appearing poor goes beyond the bank account. It affects who approaches you, the type of connection you create. People who don't see ostentation are not attracted by interest. They are attracted by affinity, by values, by essence. And that is worth its weight in gold. Because what's the point of having luxury if you can't trust anyone around you? Invisibility, in this context, is a social sieve. It filters out opportunists, repels status seekers, and reveals who is there for you, not for what you show off. And there's more. Living discreetly reduces risk. Financial, emotional, and even physical risk. You don't become an easy target, you don't become an example that needs to be surpassed, you don't attract unwanted glances. You live more lightly, with less worry, with less need to defend an image that is useless when the lights go out. This is not minimalism, it's intelligence. It's a survival tactic in a world that turns vanity into debt and appearance into handcuffs. In the end, the big turning point is simple. When you realize that you don't need to look rich, you discover that you can be free. And when you are free, money stops being an end, it becomes just a tool. The stage disappears, the performance ends, and what's left is real life. Sober, light, strategic, invisible. You don't need another car, another trip, or another pair of expensive sneakers. You need less need to prove yourself. Because when you let go of the obligation to appear rich, you gain the chance to build something that no one can take away. Freedom. Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of being. And that, in the end, is the only wealth that matters. If you understood, comment, "I choose to disappear." And share it with those who are still stuck on the stage. Because only the invisible can win a game where everyone wants to be seen.